Listen close, friend. There are some sins that follow you beyond the grave, and some chairs that rock for reasons the living can't understand. Let me tell you about Margaret and the choice that damned them all. Pull your chair closer to the fire. What I'm about to share will chill your bones and make you question everything you think you know about love, betrayal, and the price we pay for our choices. You need to understand something about small-town America in 1952. Secrets had a way of festering like infected wounds, and Margaret's secret was about to burst wide open. I was there that autumn evening when it all began to unravel, watching from my porch as the last light died behind the oak trees. Margaret Henley had been married to Thomas for 15 years, and if you asked anyone in Millbrook, they'd tell you she was blessed. Thomas owned the lumber mill, provided well, never raised a hand to her. But blessings, I've learned, can feel like prisons when your heart yearns for something else entirely. The rocking chair sat on their front porch like a faithful sentinel hand-carved walnut that Thomas had made for their first anniversary. Every evening at sunset, Margaret would sit there, her delicate fingers tracing the smooth armrests while she watched the world go by. The chair had a particular rhythm, a gentle back and forth that seemed to match the pulse of her restless heart. But that October night, something was different. The chair rocked faster, more urgently, as if it sensed what was coming. Margaret's usually composed face was flushed, her dark hair escaping from its careful pins. She kept glancing down the dirt road, waiting. That's when I saw him, James Morrison, the traveling photographer who'd been staying at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house for 3 weeks. He approached her porch with the careful steps of a man walking toward either salvation or damnation. The way Margaret's face transformed when she saw him. Lord help me, I'd never seen such naked hunger in another person's eyes. "I can't keep living this lie," she whispered, her voice carrying on the still night air. The rocking chair creaked beneath her as she stood, and for a moment it seemed to resist her movement, as if the wood itself was trying to hold her back. James took her hands in his, and I watched 27 years of my neighbor's careful respectability crumble like autumn leaves. "My train leaves at midnight," he said. "Come with me, Margaret. We'll go west, start over where nobody knows our names." The rocking chair had gone still now, but there was something unsettling about its stillness, like the moment before a storm breaks. Margaret glanced back at it, and I swear I saw her shudder. "What about Thomas?" she asked, though we all knew the answer was already written in her desperate eyes. "He'll survive," James replied, pulling her closer. "But will you? Will you survive another 15 years of this half-life?" I should have looked away, should have given them privacy for their moment of reckoning. But there was something hypnotic about watching a soul make the choice that would define eternity. Margaret walked to the rocking chair one last time, her fingers trailing across the armrest where she'd worn smooth grooves from years of nervous fidgeting. "I'm sorry, old friend," she whispered to the chair, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It was the kind of apology you give when you know forgiveness is impossible. She went inside then, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had planned this moment 1,000 times in her mind. 20 minutes later, she emerged with a single carpet-bag, wearing her best traveling dress, the blue one with the pearl buttons that Thomas had bought her for their 10th anniversary. As they walked toward James's automobile, parked just beyond the streetlight's reach, the rocking chair began to move. Slow at first, then faster, as if an invisible presence had settled into its familiar embrace. Margaret heard it too. I saw her step falter, saw her look back with eyes wide with terror. "Don't look back," James urged, his hand firm on her elbow. "Whatever you do, don't look back." But she couldn't help herself. None of us can when we're fleeing our past. The chair rocked with violent intensity now, its rhythm like an angry heartbeat. And in that moment, I swear I saw Thomas sitting there. Not the Thomas who was currently away on business in the state capital, but some essence of him, some part of his soul that refused to let her go. The automobile's engine coughed to life, shattering the night's stillness. As they drove away, kicking up clouds of dust in their wake, The rocking chair continued its frenzied dance. It rocked until dawn, when Mrs. Patterson found me still sitting on my porch, unable to look away from that cursed thing. They were free, Margaret and James. Or so they thought. 3 states away, in a modest boarding house in Denver, Margaret discovered that some chains can't be broken by distance. She woke that first morning to the sound of creaking wood, the familiar rhythm that had lulled her to sleep for 15 years. But there was no rocking chair in their rented room, just James, still sleeping peacefully beside her, and the morning light streaming through unfamiliar curtains. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, shaking him awake. James rolled over, his eyes heavy with sleep and satisfaction. "Hear what, darling?" But Margaret was already at the window, looking out at the bustling Denver street below. No rocking chairs in sight, just carriages and early-morning pedestrians going about their business. Yet the sound continued, that gentle, rhythmic creaking that had been the soundtrack to her former life. "Nothing," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just nervous, I suppose." They spent their days exploring their new city, James's camera capturing moments of their newfound freedom. He photographed her laughing by the fountain in the town square, her head thrown back with genuine joy for the first time in years. He captured her silhouette against the mountain backdrop, looking like a woman reborn. But the nights were different. Every evening, as the sun disappeared behind the Rockies, Margaret would hear it, the unmistakable sound of her old rocking chair. Sometimes it was soft, almost comforting. Other times it rocked with such violence that she was certain the neighbors below would complain about the noise. "There's nothing there," James would insist, holding her trembling form. "You're safe now." "We're safe." But Margaret knew better. She'd made a bargain with forces beyond her understanding, and payment was coming due. The 3rd week brought a letter from Millbrook. Mrs. Patterson had written to inform them that Thomas had returned from his business trip to find his wife gone. The entire town was buzzing with scandal, she wrote, but there was something else, something that made Margaret's blood run cold. "The strangest thing," Mrs. Patterson's letter continued, "is that rocking chair of yours. It hasn't stopped moving since you left. Day and night, it rocks back and forth as if someone's sitting there. Thomas tried to bring it inside, but it wouldn't budge. Tried to have it moved to storage, but no one in town will touch it now. They say it's cursed, and maybe they're right. Some say they've seen a woman's shadow in it at twilight, rocking back and forth like she's waiting for something. Or someone." Margaret's hands shook as she read those words. James found her hours later, still sitting at their small table with the letter spread before her like evidence of her crime. "We could go further west," he suggested, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "California, maybe. Start fresh where no one knows us." But Margaret was beyond such simple solutions now. "Don't you understand?" she whispered. "It doesn't matter how far we run. I can't escape what I've done. I can't escape what I am." That night, the rocking chair's rhythm changed. Instead of the gentle back and forth she'd grown accustomed to, it began a frantic, desperate cadence, the sound of someone trying to break free from invisible bonds. Margaret sat up in bed, her nightgown damp with perspiration. "Can't you hear it now?" she demanded, grabbing James's shoulder. He listened, his face growing pale in the moonlight. For the first time since their escape, he heard it too, the unmistakable creaking of wood under invisible weight, the whisper of fabric against the chair's armrests. "What have we done, Margaret?" he whispered. "What in God's name have we done?" She didn't answer because she was finally beginning to understand. The rocking chair wasn't just furniture. It was a witness to her vows, a keeper of her promises, a monument to the life she'd built and destroyed. And it would follow her across every state line, through every new beginning, until she faced the truth of her choices. The sound grew louder, more insistent, as if something was trying to rock its way through the very fabric of reality to reach her. Margaret pressed her hands to her ears, but it was useless. The sound wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was coming from within, from the place where guilt lives and grows like cancer. "I have to go back," she said suddenly, the words escaping before she could stop them. James stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. "Go back? Margaret, we can't go back. There's nothing for us there but shame and ruin." But Margaret was already moving, already packing their few belongings with the same quiet efficiency she'd used to leave. Because she finally understood that some prisons follow you wherever you go, and the only way to find peace is to walk back into them willingly. The rocking chair had taught her that lesson, one sleepless night at a time. The train journey back to Millbrook felt like riding toward Judgment Day. Margaret sat pressed against the window, watching the familiar landscape roll by, the same fields she'd dreamed of escaping, the same small towns where everyone knew everyone else's business. James held her hand, but his grip was that of a drowning man, not a lover. "We don't have to do this," he kept saying. "We can turn around at the next station, head back west, keep running." But Margaret knew better now. You can't outrun your own shadow, and guilt, she'd learned, casts the longest shadow of all. The rocking chair had followed them all the way to Colorado and back. Even now, in the train's rhythmic clacking, she heard its persistent creak. Other passengers looked at her strangely when she flinched at sounds only she could hear, when she spoke to empty air, asking it to please stop. They arrived in Millbrook on a gray October afternoon, exactly 1 month after they'd fled. The town looked smaller than Margaret remembered, shabbier somehow, as if their scandal had drained some vital force from the place. Children pointed and whispered as they walked down Main Street. Women clutched their shawls tighter and hurried their steps. Mrs. Patterson met them at the boarding-house steps, her face a mixture of curiosity and judgment. "Well, well," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "The prodigal wife returns." "Is Thomas?" Margaret began, but couldn't finish the question. "At the mill, I expect. Been working dawn to dusk since you left. Some say it's to keep busy, others say it's because he can't bear to be in that house with that thing." She didn't need to specify what thing she meant. They all knew about the rocking chair. James wanted to find lodging, to plan their next move, but Margaret couldn't wait. She walked toward her old house like a woman in a trance, drawn by forces beyond her control. The afternoon light was failing, casting long shadows across the familiar front porch. And there it was, the rocking chair, exactly where she'd left it a month ago. But something was different. The chair looked older somehow, weathered by more than just the passing weeks. The wood had darkened, and there were scratches on the armrests that hadn't been there before, as if someone had gripped them with desperate intensity. More disturbing still, the porch around the chair showed signs of constant motion. The floorboards were worn smooth in the arc where the rockers had traced their endless path. Dead leaves had been swept into perfect semicircles, following the chair's rhythm. And everywhere, scattered like accusations, were the brittle remains of flowers, roses that Thomas had planted for her years ago, now withered and blown onto the porch by the chair's restless wind. Margaret approached slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. The chair was still now, but she could feel its awareness, its patient malevolence. This wasn't just furniture anymore. It had become something else during her absence, fed by betrayal and abandonment until it transformed into something hungry and unforgiving. "Margaret!" She spun around to find Thomas standing at the gate, a lunch pail in his hands and sawdust in his graying hair. He looked older, worn down by the weight of public humiliation and private heartbreak. But his eyes still held love, and that made everything infinitely worse. "Thomas, I don't." He held up one hand, his voice steady but strained. "Don't say anything yet. Just tell me why you came back." Behind her, Margaret heard the chair give a single, deliberate creak, as if it too wanted to hear her answer. "I couldn't stay away," she whispered. "It wouldn't let me stay away." Thomas looked past her to the rocking chair, and his face went pale. "It's been waiting for you. Every night, It rocks until dawn. The whole town's been talking about it, saying it's possessed by your guilt, your broken promises. I tried to burn it once, but the wood wouldn't catch. Tried to have it hauled away, but it's rooted somehow, like it's grown into the very foundation of this house." James appeared behind them, drawn by the sound of voices. When Thomas saw him, something flickered in the older man's eyes, not anger, but something far more dangerous. Resignation. "So you brought him back too," Thomas said quietly. "To finish what you started, I suppose." The rocking chair began to move then, slowly at first, then with increasing violence. The sound was different now, not the gentle rhythm Margaret remembered, but something harsh and discordant, like bones grinding against bones. "It knows," Margaret said, backing away from the porch. "It knows what we did, what we destroyed, and it won't forgive us for it." The three of them stood there in the growing darkness, bound together by betrayal and consequences, while the rocking chair performed its mad dance. And in that moment, Margaret finally understood the true horror of her situation. She hadn't just broken her marriage vows. She'd broken faith with something deeper, something that had been watching and waiting and recording every moment of their life together. The chair had been more than furniture. It had been a witness to their love, their promises, their shared dreams. And now it demanded payment for that betrayal. The chair rocked faster, its violence shaking the entire porch. In its frenzied motion, Margaret saw her future written clearly, an eternity of restless guilt, an endless dance of punishment and regret. She had come home not to find forgiveness, but to meet her judgment. And the rocking chair, patient and implacable as death itself, was ready to deliver it. What happened next will haunt me until my dying day. Margaret walked toward that cursed chair with the slow, measured steps of a condemned woman approaching the gallows. Thomas reached out to stop her, but she shook her head, her face serene with terrible understanding. "No, Thomas. This is how it has to end." The chair stilled as she approached, as if it recognized her surrender. She turned to face both men before sitting down, her blue traveling dress spreading around her like spilled water. "I thought I could run from what I'd done," she said, her voice carrying that strange calm that comes when all illusions fall away. "I thought love justified betrayal, that desire excused destruction. But some things are sacred, and when you break them, they break you back." She settled into the chair, and immediately it began to rock, not with the violent frenzy of before, but with a rhythm that seemed almost satisfied, as if it had been waiting all this time for her to understand, to accept what she owed. James stepped forward, his face desperate. "Margaret, don't do this. We can still leave, still have our life together." But Margaret was already beyond his reach, lost in the chair's hypnotic motion. "Can you feel it, James? The weight of what we destroyed? Every happy morning I shared with Thomas, every quiet evening on this porch, every promise I made and broke, it's all here in this chair, waiting for payment." The rocking intensified, and with each motion, Margaret seemed to become more translucent, as if the chair was drawing her essence into its hungry wood. Thomas watched in horror, finally understanding that this was no ordinary punishment, but something far more profound and terrible. "The chair remembers everything," Margaret continued, her voice growing fainter. "Every anniversary celebrated, every birthday acknowledged, every small kindness shared. It was the keeper of our marriage, the witness to our love. And when I betrayed that love, I betrayed everything it had recorded and protected." The wood began to glow with a soft, amber light, as if years of stored memories were finally being released. In that light, Thomas could see them, ghostly images of happier times. Margaret younger, laughing as she rocked their stillborn baby to sleep. Margaret content, mending clothes while the chair creaked its gentle lullaby. Margaret hopeful, planning their future while the setting sun painted everything gold. "I see it now," she whispered, tears streaming down her increasingly transparent face. "The chair never trapped me. I trapped myself. Every night I sat here dreaming of escape. I was feeding it my discontent, my resentment, my growing betrayal. I turned it into a prison of my own making." James tried to reach her, but his hands passed through her like she was made of mist. "Margaret, please." But she was beyond pleading now, beyond rescue. The chair rocked faster, each motion pulling more of her into its eternal embrace. And with each fade, Thomas saw something miraculous happening. The anger in his own heart was dissolving, replaced by something he'd thought lost forever. Understanding. "I forgive you, Margaret," he said quietly, the words carrying more power than any prayer. "I forgive you both." The chair paused mid-rock, as if surprised by this unexpected grace. Margaret looked up at him, her fading eyes wide with wonder. "Thomas, you were unhappy, and I was too proud to see it. Too comfortable in my certainty to notice your pain. The chair kept our memories, but I forgot to keep making new ones worth remembering." As he spoke, something extraordinary happened. The amber light grew brighter, warmer, and instead of consuming Margaret, it began to release her. The chair continued rocking, but gently now, like a grandmother soothing a troubled child. Margaret solidified slightly, enough for Thomas to take her hand. "The chair doesn't want punishment," he said with sudden clarity. "It wants completion. It wants the story to end the way love stories should end, with forgiveness and truth." She looked up at him, then at James, who stood watching with tears on his cheeks. "I loved you both," she said simply. "But I chose wrong, and I compounded that wrong with lies and running. Can love survive that much truth?" Thomas helped her stand, the chair giving one final, satisfied creak as she rose. "Real love has to," he said. "Otherwise, what's the point of any of it?" The three of them stood together in the amber light, no longer bound by betrayal but freed by honesty. James stepped forward, his face heavy with his own recognition. "I should go," he said. "This was never my story to finish." Margaret nodded, understanding flowing between them like water finding its level. "You gave me the courage to face my discontent, James. That was your gift and your purpose. But courage without wisdom is just another form of cowardice." He kissed her forehead gently, a benediction rather than a passion, and walked away into the gathering night. They never saw him again, but sometimes Margaret thought she glimpsed him in photographs, always in the background, always capturing other people's moments of truth. As the amber light faded, the rocking chair settled into perfect stillness. It looked like ordinary furniture again, just carved walnut and faded cushions. But Margaret knew it would always be more than that. It would be their witness, their keeper of promises, their guardian of hard-won peace. She sat down in it once more, and Thomas settled on the porch steps beside her. The chair rocked gently, contentedly, as if it had finally found its proper rhythm again. They talked through the night, really talked, perhaps for the first time in years. About dreams deferred, needs unspoken, love neglected and love renewed. And the rocking chair kept time for their conversation, a steady heartbeat of hope and possibility. By dawn, they had found their way back to each other, guided by the wisdom of wood that had waited patiently for them to remember what really mattered. Some say the chair still rocks on quiet evenings, keeping time with the hearts of those who understand that love, like wood, grows stronger under pressure, more beautiful with age, more precious for having survived the storm. Tell me, friend, what sacred witnesses have you ignored in your own life? What keeper of promises sits silent in your home, recording your choices, waiting patiently for you to remember what truly matters? Because somewhere in your world, something is keeping score of your love, your loyalty, your truth. The question is, when your moment of reckoning comes, will you run from the chair that knows your story, or will you sit down and face the rhythm of your own heart?